It was still dark outside, and I was warming my hands on my cup of coffee because it was so cold outside. My heart was heavy that day as I thought to myself, why am I even in this job? I thought the real world would be better than this. As a recent graduate from Azusa Pacific University, I knew little about what would lie ahead in the professional world. I was one of those naive people that thought, as soon as I have this piece of paper, it's going to be smooth sailing. Everybody's just going to welcome me with open arms. I quickly found out I was wrong. As I got deeper into beginning my job, I learned new things about myself and started to gain some new insecurities. The biggest of those was communicating and speaking in front of people. But everyone, the reason that I was truly afraid was not just because of speaking. It was ultimately the fear of failure. Orson Martin once said, "The obstacles we face would melt away if instead of cowering in front of them, we boldly walked through them." I firmly believe this statement. I've noticed so many people that prevent themselves from taking steps to advance themselves and excel because of a fear of failure. And I've never been a huge fan of New Year's resolutions. And in fact, I'm guilty of making fun of them. I've always thought it was kind of interesting how people would get all psyched up about breaking habits or shedding the unnecessary pounds, and then 2 weeks they're right back to where they started. But this year, I am embracing a New Year's resolution. I'm challenging myself to face a fear that I've never faced before, and that is speaking in front of other people. My life in these last 3 years has taken some twists and turns that have changed the way that I view my fears. In 2012, one of my biggest fears came true and I lost my job. I would get so stressed thinking about that before that and was always just thinking, well, what if I find another job? Or what if I don't find another job? What if I end up in the poorhouse? And I realized how ridiculous these thoughts were as I was able to collect myself, clear my mind, charter a new course in those few months of unemployment, and even try a new job, real estate. My wife, who I proudly call my other half, is also on a similar course as me and has been very encouraging and ushering me along by facing my fears. She, as a young student, was almost phobic, deathly afraid of taking tests. She would sit down in front of tests and panic and go blank, and it caused her for many years to avoid advancing in school. But I'm proud to say that she as well is facing her fears and is enrolled in a massage therapy program. And she's getting A's on her tests and rising to even the top of her class. Another example of how even recently I've taken a big step to face my fears is when we packed up the moving van and with tears in our eyes waved goodbye to our friends and family and moved 3,000 miles across the country to Charlotte. It goes without saying that it's a lot easier living around people who love you, know you, familiar faces that will support you. But sometimes life calls us to higher challenges and new places that will continue to stretch us and grow us. And Charlotte is one of those places for us. It's a place of new beginnings. And as a child growing up, my wife and I both share this in common. We were the youngest of 3 children. And so we were always haunted by that age-old term, babies of the family. And come to think about it through my life, we really were treated that way as babies a lot of times, baby. And so for so many years, I would long for the moment where I could puff my chest and say, I'm independent, I can do this, I've got this. And so with that motivating us, we knew it was the right time to jump into a new phase of our life and move across the country. I know many people have failed in life, but what sets them apart is that they're able to pick themselves back up and keep going. Giving speeches is one of my biggest fears, and that's why I'm in Toastmasters. It's not easy to be up here, but I know that it's really good each day to continue to face my fears, so that one day, as Orson Martin said, they will melt away. Mr. Toastmaster.
Thank you for the icebreaker speech there. I think first speech is probably the biggest hurdle to get over, so once you get over the speech,
Matthew,
it's easier to go
I don't
through.
know if speech number 3 is actually 6 to 8 minutes, the abstract concept.
Okay. You guys want to go ahead and make notation, especially the evaluator. It's going to be the third speech by Brian Wilson, be 6 to 8 minutes.
Good afternoon, everyone. Apologies as we work through some of our technological challenges here. So, as Matt mentioned, today my speech is about service and leadership and how the two interact. So let me go ahead and start off by asking the group a couple of questions. When you, whether you're at the beginning of your career or a little bit further in your career, think about your work and your job and what you do, who here wants to be a leader in what they do? Raise your hand, show of hands. Who wants to be a leader? Okay. So many of us want to be a leader. When we think about leadership, let me go around and maybe a couple of you will help me out with this. What characteristics do we associate with being a leader? Tim, what characteristics would you associate with being a leader?
Vision.
Vision. Excellent. Peter?
Strength of character.
Strength of character.
Integrity.
Another good one. Anybody else? I'm sure there's a couple more out there. Teamwork. Excellent. How about one more?
Good communication skills.
Good communication skills. Very, very key and valued by any Toastmaster. Thank you, Cheryl. Absolutely. Those are all great suggestions. And if we think about it, a lot of those really were softer kind of skills. Now, if we look back a few generations ago, the post-World War II generation, leadership was a lot different. We had leaders that were very autocratic, very top-down. Some might even call them dictators. And that management style was one that was born out of fear, and it was born out of concern that if you didn't get the job done, then you might wind up with a smaller paycheck or a smaller bonus, or you wouldn't get that prime vacation slot on July 4th week during the summer. And that was the motivator. But as we've come forward now, what we found is that leadership has changed. And leadership has become something that is a little bit softer, because you're not able in a big organization any longer just to simply get your goals done by pushing down on people. You really need to be able to reach out, branch out across the organization in more of a matrix style kind of management to get things done. We're all familiar here with Dale Carnegie, How to Win Friends and Influence People. One of my favorite Dale Carnegie quotes is, "A man convinced against his will is of the same opinion still." A man convinced against his will is of the same opinion still. Now there's two reasons I like that. Number one, because it rhymes. And who doesn't like something that rhymes? But secondly, of course, because it's true. We've all been in that situation where something's been pushed down on us and we've had to complete the work or the project and we didn't 100% agree with it, or we didn't have 100% buy-in, but we begrudgingly did it. Another Dale Carnegie-ism is a statement he makes, which is this, that there's only one way to get a person to do something, and that's to want them to do it. It's for them themselves to want to do it. So you cannot just force something upon others. You have to really think about, what is the commonality here? What is the shared goal? How can I foster teamwork in order to get this goal accomplished? And that really is what has become a leader in modern society. This autocratic dictatorship kind of approach really has become a bit passé, and we've moved on to a modern leader, what many people would call a servant leader. So let's take a look at a couple of definitional points we can use in terms of leadership. What do effective leaders do? They provide a clear direction. So they know what the goal is, but they also provide consistency in terms of what the ethics are, what the values are of the organization, and they exemplify those values themselves. They foster collaboration. So what they're really doing is getting people working together. They're not so much pushing down answers from on top, as much as they're really engaging the team to bring their best ideas forward. And they're motivating towards achievement. And if you think about motivation, that has changed too. Decades ago, your motivation was to keep your job. Your motivation was to keep that pension. Your motivation was not to wind up in the poorhouse. But really in modern times, as some of the younger members of our society have entered the workforce, this has changed. My generation, Gen X, is on the cusp, but this new generation, as they call them, Gen Y or the millennials, they do things differently. They're not as concerned about the money. They want money, they like to spend money. But they want other things out of their job as well. They want a sense of fulfillment. They want a sense of accomplishment. There's a great book by an author by the name of Daniel Pink, and it's called Drive. And I would recommend it to any of you who are interested in understanding some of the dynamics of the millennial generation and what motivates them at work. And it really is that sense of purpose, that sense of a greater part of community that pushes them on, as opposed to somebody my age or a little bit older who really saw work as much more regimented and much more based on monetary compensations. So let me go ahead then and just offer you a couple of quotes that I found in researching this. The first quote was offered by Toastmasters itself, so obviously it's an important one. It's from J. Carla Northcutt, and she was an educator, a modern educator in the modern era, and she states, "The goal of many leaders is to get people to think more of the leader. But the goal of a great leader is to get every member of the team to think more of themselves." So again, it's not about the leader anymore, it's about the members of the team. Even if you look back into religious writings, for example, the Bible, you'll find quotes and verses such as this, where Jesus states, "Whoever wants to become great among you must be your servant, and whoever wants to be first must be a servant to all." We go back even further than that, 500 BC, where we have Chinese proverbs that speak that there are 4 types of leaders, the greatest of which is the person that isn't even noticed. The second greatest, the person, the leader who's loved and praised. The third, the one who's feared. And then the last is the one who's defied and despised. So if you look at it, even in this saying, which is almost 2,500 years old at this point, they're saying that to be that cult of personality, that everyone loves you, that is not the highest form of leadership. It is when you're in the background and leading others. That truly is great leadership. So now that we've talked a little bit about it, let's talk about team leaders. What do they do? We know their characteristics. What do they do to go ahead and really encourage the members of their team? Well, they encourage participation. They want everybody to be involved. No idea is too small. No idea is so silly that it shouldn't be brought up. Let's put it out there. We're a team. Sometimes some of the wackiest ideas in the world turn out to be genius. You just don't know it at the time. They facilitate communication. They make sure that everybody is welcome, that no voice speaks over the others, that everybody feels that it's a place of comfort to come and interact and look to solve problems. Because ultimately, we all have problems to solve, whether it be personal problems and you need members of your family to get on board with you, problems at work, problems in the community, certain issues you'd like to help the community move forward with, but facilitating problem solving, tolerating mistakes. An interesting thing that I learned was about Thomas Edison, who invented the light bulb. He took over 1,000 tries to find that perfect material for the filament of the light bulb. 1,000 times. And they asked him when he was all done and he had this great light bulb, well, weren't you so frustrated that it took you 1,000 times to come up with this perfect material? And he said, no, Because I knew every time I took a chance and I was wrong, I was one step closer because I was able to check one thing off the list that I knew wasn't going to work. So again, tolerating mistakes and understanding they're part of any creative process, and helping team members grow. Again, from a viewpoint that this isn't about me and how great of a leader I am, the quote we heard from Carla Norcutt earlier, but rather it's how great of a person can I help you be? When you think about letting people grow and servicing the community and servicing each other, let's think about our small club here. Right now, for example, we have Brian as the VP of Education, and he'll schedule us up. But before there was Brian, there was another VP of Education, and so on and so forth. For over 30 years now, people have served to sustain this club. People have brought service forward in order to accomplish these goals. And so, whether it be Brian as VP of Ed, or Grady as the treasurer, or Peter in his role, we have all paid it forward over time to sustain this for over 30 years. Persuasion. We must be willing and able to persuade others because, again, a man convinced against his will is of the same opinion still. You have to persuade people to be willing to take action, and that's very key. Now, if you do this as a leader, whether it be in your house, in your organization, in this club, you will flourish as a person because you will truly learn what it is to serve. And those organizations that you care about most will also thrive, and you'll have that sense of fulfillment. You'll improve the quality of your work life or your home life. Everybody feels happier. You go into a store, you had a good team meeting, there's a big smile on people's faces. If they don't have a good team going on, they don't really want to see that coworker they don't like too much, so they kind of go in a little bit sluggish in the morning. Well, that's no fun. That doesn't bring out the best environment. It increases productivity, reduces costs, enhances product or service quality. All of these things flow from having that positive teamwork dynamic, which is led by the right kind of leader. Overall, the organization, the company as a whole can improve. So my challenge to each of us is to consider how you can be a better servant to those around you. How you can bring your time, your gifts forward in a way to, again, pay it forward. A person who is worthy of being a leader wants power not for himself, but in order to be of service. I leave that thought with you, and I thank you for allowing me to serve this club. Mr. Toastmaster.
What I learned losing $1 million. This is an abstract speech. This is my opportunity to talk to you about a concept that I think we could all benefit from. I recently read a book. We're all adults. Why would I read such a book? Well, let's first get into the who, when, what, and why. Who? This book is about a guy named Jim Paul. In 1983, Jim Paul had a very, very bad year. Now, there's been a lot of cases throughout history, especially recently, where there's been bigger losses. I think of Enron. I think of MCI WorldCom. There's been a lot of corporate disasters, and there's been a lot of investors, from hedge funds to investing groups, that have lost a lot of money. This was $1.6 million. $1.6 million of your own personal money. Think about that. You're just going along with your world, and all of a sudden, boom, you're down $1.6 million. And this was in '83. Peter, what do you think that would be today? Like 5 million?
At least.
Yes. Who wants to prevent that kind of thing from happening to them? I do. Throughout the book, Jim talks about something kind of interesting. He talks about Smart versus wise. And that's what today is about. Smart people, they learn, they grow, they do things different. They take their experiences and they develop skills and they grow as a person. Wise people, sometimes they learn from what the smart people did and they skip their mistakes. Let's all be wise. Let me give you some background and catch you up. This is a book. Contributing factors for Jim's life started out when he was 9 years old. He was a poor kid. He started working in a country club. He started seeing what other people had, the differences between a nice car and what his parents were driving. I didn't even catch some of the references. I was so young. Oldsmobile versus Chevy, I thought they were both the same. Apparently they're not. Maybe I needed to spend some time at the country club. He started seeing that some of the nicer things in life were out there, and he started wanting that. But he also started breaking the rules. He started breaking the rules and getting rewarded. An example which was he went out for rush in college. He got tired of going to parties, so he called up the nicest fraternity and said, hey, you know what? This is Jim. The guy has no idea who he's talking to on the phone. I'm really tired of going to all these parties, Sig F, Sig News. Tell you what, I'm going to come over, let me just get my pledge pin, and let's just get this started. It worked. He would repeatedly, throughout his life, just make very bold decisions, and it worked for him. And he would get rewarded. He started feeling that he was different than some of his peers. He started feeling like he was better. In some cases, he let it get to his head. 1983, as a commodities broker, he got into bean oil. And it's kind of like trading places. You guys remember trading places where it's all about oranges, you know, and what is the oranges going to do? In this case, it was bean oil. And he didn't know really much about it, other than it goes to make mayonnaise. Mayonnaise! What the heck? There's got to be more for it, but he was in big, and so is everybody he knew. So it was $1.6 million loss for him. But there was 1.5 times that with hundreds of people out there of people choosing to join with him and invest. So, on August 26th, he's having a great world, thinking life can't get any better than this. He's sitting on a boat dock with his friends. He's up big. He had a $248,000 gain that day. That's big money. He's thinking life can't get any better. Excuse me. He was right. It did. Between that date, that Friday in August, in November, 75 days later, he went on to lose $20,000 to $25,000 a day. He lost big. So after that, what he said was, you know what? If I'm sick, I go to the doctor. And I don't want just a regular doctor. I want a good doctor. And so he went and started talking to the investment people out there. His quest was to learn how to do it right. He wanted to learn from the best. But what he found is that there is a million ways to make good money. There's only a few ways to lose it. Let me say that again. There's a million ways to make a lot of money. But there's only a few to lose it. You know, Peter Lynch said one thing. Warren Buffett said another. He went and read all the books and looked at what everybody was doing. And they would sometimes have conflicting opinions. It's like, what are you going to do? I lost big. I got to get this back. I mean, he lost his job because of his losses. He lost his car. He lost his position on the board for the commodities. He lost his seat to actually sell it. He lost everything. And eventually he also lost his parents in that same year by coincidence. So the guy learned a lot about loss. He learned through this process how to minimize loss as well. So, based upon his terrible experience, what can we learn? Well, number one, there is some psychological dynamics of loss. There's internal and external losses. External, like a basketball game. It happens. No, it's a fact. Internal is something you internalize. And when you internalize something, there's 5 stages of loss. Everybody knows what I'm talking about. Denial, not the river in Egypt, but denial. Anger. We're talking about bargaining, depression, and then acceptance. He found that for investing, sometimes people went through the same range of emotions when there was loss. And then he also talked about discrete events versus continuous events. Discrete is like one time. It's like a roll of the dice at a blackjack table or something like that. Just a one-time event. The market is continuous. It's not set up to be friendly for loss. You have to plan for it. There was also risk that he talked about. Inherent risk versus created risk. Inherent risk, there is risk in the market. Created risk, you do something to create more. He was pointing out that from a market standpoint, there's different types of investing. There is investing if we're looking for long-term gain. There is trading, there's speculating, there's betting, and there's gambling. Betting and gambling did not work well for controlling loss in a continuous market. Now, it wasn't so much that you can define something and saying, well, he's gambling, you know, he's in Vegas. It was actually the actions a person showed and the behavior they showed that determined what they were actually doing. So you could be a gambler in the market, or you could be a speculator in Vegas. In summary, the biggest thing he learned was that you can't personalize success or failure, especially not success. There is also a psychological crowd that also creates risk, something I don't have time to cover, but a third risk. And you have to have a good plan. Use that plan. Use a plan with if-then statements to keep your shirt, to keep the risk from being personalized. In summary, I hope that we can all take a look at how we behave and how we personalize loss so that we can keep from committing those same mistakes. Mr. President.
Thank you, Brian, for the excellent speech there. I think made some great points, as nobody wants to experience loss, especially when it comes to money. We all want to gain, and keep on gaining more money. So I'd like to go ahead and move on to our evaluation portion of this today's meeting. And I'm going to call on our general evaluator, Ms. Kay, to come up here and introduce our evaluators for us.
Can we do the times first?
Oh, yes, excuse me. Yeah, sorry about that. Missed the time. Did everybody qualify?
Well, Graham qualified at 5 minutes and 10 seconds, and I know it said 5 to 7 minutes, but it is an icebreaker, so 4 to 6 minutes, I believe, is still what an icebreaker is, but you still qualified within that. Brendan at 12 minutes 15 seconds and qualified, and Brian, you went over like by 7 seconds, and I know I didn't get my little white light on soon enough because I kept thinking, you gotta stop, you finished.
Oh, well.
You had a good stop point, but you added another 2 sentences because it was just 7 seconds over. So it was 8 minutes, 37 seconds. Pardon?
Within operator error, 7 seconds. It would take you that long to pull your hand up.
But anyway, so it did go over 30 seconds and then 7 seconds. Okay. Going on to the evaluations.
Do we want to go ahead and vote at this point as well?
Yes, if you would, just go ahead and throw your votes to the vote counter over there. Oh, well. Be sure to bring it to Cheryl's attention.
Sure.
So Brian is officially qualified or not qualified?
Not.
He's not, okay.
I mean,
Just want to make sure we all know.
thanks. We have a wonderful team of evaluators today. And our first evaluator is Emily Crespo. Emily is a fairly new member. Is this your first evaluation for us?